I was just mentioning to you about Rachel. She wrote a very nice letter and she said how much she missed all of you all, how much she enjoyed, she and her family enjoyed the feast, and she said that all you people were so friendly. I mean, even in spite of many of you not having met her for a very long time, not seen her for a very long time, not have a family for a very long time. She was also full of love and affection towards them, and also she met a lot of new people who she had heard about but never met before. And still, in spite of being totally new to some of the people there, they were so friendly and so warm and affectionate towards her and her family. So she was very touched about that, and she at least wrote me 3 letters so far saying how much she enjoyed the feast. So I said, come again. I told her, you're always welcome again. I've told her also that she and her family were very good examples to all of us. She set a very good example. Even the room that she had, we didn't realize it, but there were a few leaks in that room. But not a word of complaint. And it's only after they left that Francis and Mrs. Surendra moved into that room, and then they realized there were a few leaks that if they had informed us earlier, we probably would have got it fixed. For them. But I mean, the attitude was so nice, and I really appreciate it, and really appreciate the fact that she was a family and she was able to attend the feast with us this year or last year. A newspaper columnist and minister, George Crane, tells a story about a wife who came to his office, and he used to do counseling for marriage and stuff like that. So this lady came to his office full of hatred towards her husband. She said, I do not only want to get rid of him, that means she wanted to divorce him, but I want to get even. Before I divorce him, I want to hurt him so bad, as much as he has hurt me. Dr. Crane heard what she had to say, and she spewed out a lot of anger and hurt and vengeance. How things happen in people's lives sometimes. And she said, tell me, doctor, what I can do to really teach him a lesson. He deserves it, and I want to teach him a lesson. After Dr. Crane heard her and listened to her and the whole story, he said, I'll give you one piece of advice. He said, go home and act as if you really love your husband. Act as if, just act. You don't really love him, sure, I accept that. Act as if you really love your husband. Tell him how much he means to you. Praise him for his decent traits. Go out of your way to be kind and considerate and generous as possible towards him. Spare no effort to please him, to enjoy him. Make him believe you love him. After you have convinced him that of your undying love and how you cannot live without him, drop him the bomb. Tell him that you are going to get divorced. That will really hurt him. With revenge in her eyes, this woman smiled and exclaimed, beautiful, beautiful. Will he ever be surprised? And she did it with enthusiasm. 1 month, 2 months passed along, and she showed love, kindness, listening, giving, reinforcing, sharing, all the traits that show that she loved her husband. 3 months passed by, and this lady was supposed to come back in 2 months and not return. So Dr. Crane called her on the phone and said, Madam, what about your divorce? I thought you were going to divorce your husband. What happened? She said, divorce? She explained, never. I discovered I really love him. Her actions had changed her feelings. Motion results in emotion. The ability to love is established not so much by fervent promise as often repeated deeds. When we get married, we make our marital vows, and we say that for better or for worse, whatever, we will continue to live with this man or woman till death do us part. But those are words. When it comes to action, it's a whole new ballgame. Why am I talking about love today? It's because on the 14th of this month, February, is Valentine's Day. I mean, Valentine's Day was a day that we never knew about many years ago. As a matter of fact, kind of in India, it was unheard of. Somebody or some people would know, but very few celebrated it. Today, it is celebrated by many of the young people all over Bangalore, as far as I can see, and I see all over India, much to the anger and the laments of some of our fundamentalist groups. Now, Valentine's Day is not really necessarily a Christian day, so per se, as some people would say. But what we see is that any tradition that we practice, it's not so much the tradition that we practice, like we talked about Christmas, Easter. It's not so much a tradition we practice or rather we celebrate, as much as what we put into it, what we think about doing on that day, what it actually should mean to all of us. That is what is important. Very few people really know where Valentine's Day came about, when it originated, and what it really meant, and what it should mean to us today. Very few people know and understand what this particular day means. Now, actually, this day was started many years ago, just around 250 AD, that early in the early church. That was the time it started, 250 years after Jesus came on this earth. And the person called Valentine was a priest. He was a Catholic priest and he lived in Rome. At that time, the emperor of Rome was Claudius, and the people called him Claudius the Cruel. Now, this was the Roman emperors that came before the Emperor Constantine. So, it was the time when the church faced a lot of persecution. The Catholic Church was not really formed because in the process of being formed, it was not really formed. Neither did they have any powers in those days. So Claudius was a very cruel king or emperor that ruled over Rome and the areas around it. Valentine didn't like the emperor, and he was not the only one. There were many people in the Roman Empire that did not like the emperor. The emperor wanted to build a very big army, a huge army, and he wanted as many young men as possible to volunteer to fight in war. But very few young men were willing to volunteer. The reason for that Claudius really investigated. The reason for that was many of the young men were thinking about getting married, or they were already married, and since they were thinking of getting married, had girlfriends or already married, they did not really want to go to war. And of course, their girlfriends or wives and family definitely did not want to get to go to war, because they knew what happened in wars. People died. So they did not want to go to war. So Claudius, he tried all kinds of means to get young men to join the army, and when he found very few were willing to join the army, he realized what was the real bottom, the real main reason why they weren't entering the army, and that was because they wanted to get married or they were already married. So what he did is, he banned marriages. Now, Valentine was the type of priest who loved people getting married. And so he conducted many weddings, and he enjoyed doing it. When Emperor Claudius promulgated the decree where he said that marriages are banned in my country, Valentine continued to secretively conduct marriage ceremonies and get people married. He continued to do that without fear of the emperor. One day when he was conducting a marriage in an underground chamber, he heard footsteps and a whole group of soldiers entered. Now, this particular room in which he conducted the weddings had two doors. One main door from where he went up and another door from where he exit. When he heard the footsteps, he asked the married couple to run away. So they succeeded in escaping, but poor Valentine was arrested and thrown into jail. The thing about Valentine was that he did not give up hope, and he did not get discouraged. In those days, the jails were really very bad places to live in. They were terrible places where you weren't just left alone, but you were tortured from time to time. And Valentine was tortured. Yet he kept a happy face, and many of the young people tried to see him, and if they couldn't see him, they would throw bouquets of flowers from outside the dungeon over into his window, and also cards and letters showing him how much they loved him and how much they appreciated all that he did. Valentine, there was only one person, one young lady that Valentine was able to see, and that was the guard, the prison guard's daughter, who also liked Valentine a lot. So she would visit him, and the guard, because she was a daughter of the prison guard, she would enter, she would meet him, and they would speak for hours. And Valentine would send her letters that she could go and share with all the people outside, the young people outside, of his trials in jail, as well as what they need to do to show their love towards God. He was preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ in the jail and the love of God in the jail. Eventually, when the emperor came to know that this was what he was doing, that in spite of being in jail, he was having a great impact on his kingdom, he took him, tortured him, and killed him. And he died in 270 AD. On the 14th of February. That's why 14th of February is celebrated as Valentine's Day. Interesting story. Also, that's an interesting tradition that was started at that time. But few people know this story, and even few people know what really this day was meant to be. That it was a day when people should show their love to one another, show their appreciation for their spouses, show their appreciation for the children, show their appreciation to whoever they come in contact with, to learn to love one another. Brother, we live in a very selfish world. If you really look at it, we live in a very selfish world. If you look in the newspapers, almost every day, there is somebody is murdered, somebody is raped, all kinds of violence takes place. People don't have any care for others. They love only themselves. A selfish society in which you live, people today love only themselves. They have little love for others and little concern even for other people. It happens not only in this country, everywhere in the world, among leaders, among politicians, among business people, in families, homes, and even the churches. There is all of these things happening all over, because the society we live in rubs on to us, and we may be Christian and we know what is right and wrong, but because of the society we live in, the conditions we live in, this kind of negative things rub on to us, and whether we like it or not, we become part of them. Now, there was a similar situation that happened in the days of Paul. Paul was the minister to the Corinth people. The Corinthians were immature Christians. The Corinthians had cut loose from their own old heritage, or their own heritage that they had. And you need to know a little bit of the Corinthian history. In the year 149 BC, the Roman army sacked Corinth. That means they attacked Corinth and destroyed it. And all the people were scattered. Most of them were killed, and the rest who escaped scattered all over. Their descendants 100 years later came back to Corinth and rebuilt that city of Corinth. They were all from Greek origin, or most of them were from Greek origin. And you know how the Greeks can be. They were very highly educated people. They were intellectual people. They would debate on every issue. They used to keep in touch with everything that happened around them. And they were very good at debates. They were very good at oratory, speaking. And they spoke all the time. They spoke in the town square, in the markets, everywhere. And they were respected for the way they spoke. They were very good orators. So that was the kind of environment in which Paul came to convert people into Christianity. He wrote, as far as we know, he loved the people, and he wrote at least 2 letters to them. And we have those letters recorded in our Bibles, 1st and 2nd Corinthians. He loved these people, but these people had a lot of problems that he had to deal with. One of the problems that he found with the Corinthians was they lacked any love for others. They were intellectuals who lacked any love for one another. And so, Paul would write letters to them, and he wrote a very interesting letter in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We'll turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we'll go to this chapter verse by verse, because this chapter gives us a good understanding of the kind of love that God wants us to have. It's a very good understanding of the kind of love God wants us to have. As a matter of fact, 1 Corinthians 13 is a chapter that we usually as ministers read during the wedding ceremony. We read this chapter to the married couple or the ones who are getting married. If you read 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verses 1 to 3.
If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient.
Yeah, that's right. Up to 3. Actually, it's chapter 3. Yeah, up to 3. That's all. If we go to the next month after that, what we see here is the Corinthians prided themselves for the oratory. As a matter of fact, some of the best and the most learned philosophers came from this area of the world at that time. Some of them we know very well. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, they were all Greeks. And they came from around this area. Paul was saying that if you could speak well, if you can convince people about the gift of the gab, he says, really that is not enough. He said, that's not enough. He said, you need more than that. So what he was telling the Corinthians that, okay, I know you people are good at speaking. Really that is not enough. You need something more. What he says to them is that if you can speak well, it is like a resounding gong or clanging cymbal. He said, it is nothing. He calls it nothing. In verse 2 he says, it is worthless, meaningless, of no value. And the words that he used for meaning worthless, meaningless and no value was similar word that was used to a man who was paralyzed, completely paralyzed, lying in bed, unable to do anything, and is only a burden to everybody. He is basically good for nothing. And in the Greek culture of that time, a person in that situation was usually allowed to die. They wouldn't bother to look after them because there was no kind of value placed on human beings like we see today. Today we understand the value of human beings because we know that whether a person is physically, mentally challenged or whatever a person may be, he is still a reflection of God. He is a potential son or daughter of God. We realize that today it's Christianity that has brought dignity and value to human life. In those days, it was nothing. If you were in that particular situation, most people would take you and put you out somewhere, throw you away, and within a few days you would die just out of neglect, out of starvation, basically out of lack of love. Basically, the person will die. So what he was saying is that there is no point in having all these qualities if you do not have love. Love, says a psychiatrist A.A. Brill, is necessary to survival, he says. It is quite as essential for a person to have love, said the doctor, as to have pure air and food to sustain him. Many people who are neglected do not die of starvation. They do not die of not having proper food or shelter or clothing. They die of neglect. Many die. Many old people, for example, when everyone has left them and they are alone, living alone, they have nothing to look forward to. They often die of neglect. They give up on eating, drinking, everything because they really do not want to live. They have lost all interest in life. They die of neglect. So what we see here, what Paul is saying here, that whatever qualities you may have, what is the most important quality is love. Do not devalue love. Love is everything. Love is everything. And let's move on to verses 4 to 7. Verses 4 to 7.
Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres.
Yeah, now you see there are so many things that are involved in this one word love. So many things. When you look at it, there are so many things that are involved here. The cartoonist, Charles Schultz, died in the Home Office. He's the one who is the author, if I'm not mistaken, of this Charlie Brown. Right? He's the author of that. He once went to the home of a friend and he's forced to get on with his dinner jacket and all that, like all those people go in the Western countries. And his friend said, remove your dinner jacket and give it to me. Let's put it, be comfortable. So he took out his jacket and gave it to his friend. His friend took it and put it onto a jacket hanger in the other room. And when he came back with a big, heavy medal. And the medal was tied to a chain. And he told Charles, wear this medal, while having dinner, wear this medal on this chain, this necklace. So Charles looked at the medal, he loved it. On that medal was written in big LOV on that medal. So he looked at it carefully, he was very well calm. He liked the medal and he saw what was on it. Then he handed it back to his friend and with a wiry Charlie Brown smile on his face, he said, this is just too hard for me. Do you have by any chance a medal that says like? So what Schultz is pointing out the truth, here, he's making a point of truth here. He's saying that it is very difficult to love. It's not easy to love. And when you look at what my wife just read of all the qualities you require in order to show real love to someone, it is very difficult. And actually, in order to be able to have that kind of love, you need the grace and faith of God. You can't do this on your own. And when we have the wedding ceremonies, we read about this. What is the purpose of reading it? To show the bridal couple that they in marriage are going to try their very best with God's help to exercise these qualities in a marriage. I know what, if anyone puts these qualities into action, actually put them in action, we will not have any marriage breakups, any divorces in this country. We will not have any divorces. These qualities are absolutely essential. At the same time, they work. So, Paul, what he's saying here is, first he tells us that everything is more important than is love. And then he gives us the quality or the test that shows us how we should love. The test that if you really love someone, you'll be patient towards that person, you'll be kind towards that person, and I'll go through all these a little bit as we go along. One of the tests that he gives us, the first one that he says is, love is patient, or rather, another way of saying is, it is love suffers long. Love suffers long. A young man at the breakfast table wanted to break the news to his father that he was interested in a girl. So he said, Dad, I'm going to get married. So his dad asked him, pause for a little while, and his dad said, how do you know you are ready to get married? His father asked his son, how do you know you're ready to get married? Son said, I am in love. I sure am in love. Said the son. How do you know you're in love? Asked the father. The son said, last night as I was kissing my girlfriend goodbye, her dog bit me and I did not know till I reached home that it had bitten me. So, father told son, that is not an expression of love. Told my son, it's not an expression of love. Another couple went to a marriage counselor and said, we are absolutely ready to get married. We cannot wait to get married. So the counselor said, you can't wait. You can't wait. If you seriously cannot wait to get married, you need to wait to get married. You are not ready to marry. You need to wait to get married. Because you know what? Love suffers long. So you have to suffer long. If you can't do that now, you can't learn that now, what will you do after you get married when so many things happen and you are going to have to suffer long? So he said, learn now to be patient. And you know what happens is, when people say they cannot wait to get married, they are not thinking about what happens after they get married. They are thinking about sex, they are thinking about attraction, they are thinking about stability, dependability, so many things, attractiveness, personality. They are looking at all those outward traits. They are not looking at the inside. And they need to wait and see the inside and understand it before they love or they decide to get married. Love is patient. And that patience extends into marriage and to the very end of our lives. Another trait that is talked about here I won't go through all of them. Another trait that is talked about here is love is kind. Love is kind. In an article in the Los Angeles Times, this article told about the impact of love on children that are mentally challenged, or retarded children as you would call them, that are mentally challenged. The press said children who are ignored and neglected, not kissed or hugged or spoken to or given any stimulation, so their intelligence reduces, they said. So actually a child who is normal can be retarded if they are not given any love, or no love is expressed towards them. A prominent psychiatrist, Carl Menninger, said that love is working miracles for the mentally ill in cancers. Dr. Menninger contends that love is one of the most effective cures in healing mental illness. When reporters asked Menninger how it was that 80% of his patients recovered, he replied, the secret is not in electric shocks, surgery, group therapy, drugs, etc. This plays a part, he says, but the real secret is contained in a single word called love. Actually, I had experienced this, and my family also experienced this firsthand for a matter. I think the brethren in Chennai, when I was pastoring the church there in Chennai, would have seen this firsthand. There was once when we had church as usual, a married couple, American married couple, visited our church. They were from our church, but living in the US. They had come down to India because they had no children and wanted to adopt a child. So they went, they were in contact with the orphanage in Kerala. So they went to Kerala and got a child, a girl. She was probably about a year or so old. And they came to Chennai and they had to go back after 1 week to complete all the procedures. They had signed all the papers, but then it would go to the government and all the procedures will become finished. Then it would come back to them and they would be given the papers that were required for them to take this child, who was an Indian, back to the US. So they had to spend a week or 2 weeks, I think, in India before they went back to the US. So they told us, when they came with this child, and this child, we fully thought this child was retarded. She seemed thin, very malnutrition, undernourished. When he spoke to her, she just stared at you and there was absolutely no expression on her face. You did not know whether she understood you or whatever. She wouldn't smile, she did nothing whatsoever. Neither would she come to us when we tried to carry her. She stayed and clung to her foster mother and didn't go to anyone else. 1 week later, when they came back, and we realized this couple was a very loving couple, because even while they were there, they showered their love upon her. They had no children. This was the child that they had received, and they were going to shower their love and care for her. 1 week later, they came back to church again, and we were amazed at the change in this little girl. She smiled, and she tried to talk. She didn't try to talk. She smiled, she came to us, and she was so very friendly and so very affectionate, and she behaved just like a normal child. Just within 1 week, this child had changed from what she was to what she had become. And I'm pretty sure this girl would have grown up by now, maybe a young teenager or something, and doing very well. And we saw a similar thing happen in Dr. Sundaram's orphanage, when he kept this physically and mentally retarded boy, who, when we first saw him, we had no eye contact with him. We didn't know where he was looking or what he was doing. And within a few months when we went again, this boy had changed. Love does a lot of good to people. We cannot survive without love. Another quality that Paul mentions here is love envies not. American Standard Version Bible says, love is not jealous. Solomon was a man who knew something about jealousy, because in Song of Solomon, we not turn there, chapter 8 verse 6, it says, jealousy is as cruel as the grave. Jealousy is as cruel as the grave. Jealousy destroys relationships, and it's not good. It shows a lack of real love. It shows selfishness. If we turn to Philippians chapter 2 verse 4. Philippians chapter 2 verse 4.
Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others.
Yes. Imagine if you lived in a world where everyone showed not only interest to themselves but interest to others. What a different world this world would have been. What a different world. But in this world, people try to take advantage of one another. If they are in a more powerful position, they take advantage of the ones who are less powerful, who have less in a lower position than they are. We also see another quality of love is love bears all things. Love bears all things. Rather humorous stories told about a man who was, he had traveled all over the world. There was a man by the name of Elder Huffman. He had traveled all over the world and seen all kinds of countries. It was part of his job. And he met a lot of friends and made a lot of friends in many different countries. And he would communicate with them. When he went back home, he would communicate with them by letters. And many of the ones who he wrote to did not know to read or write good English. They knew just a smattering of English. So there was one person who wrote to him very often, and when he received this letter that he received, one of the letters that he received from his friend, who knew very well he did not know much English, and his English was really broken English that Huffman had to read very carefully several times before he could understand what this man was really trying to say. His grammar was poor and his words that he used were very poor, so he had a hard time understanding him. But Huffman had a heart of love, and he was deeply touched by one of his letters, which he ended with, "The mistakes you will cover with the coat of love." Now, this is a little crooked English, but you can see the meaning. Says, his mistakes, he says, you will cover with the coat of love. And so, brethren, we have to do that. We see in one another all kinds of faults and defects. None of us are perfect. Husbands are not perfect. Wives are not perfect. Okay, children are not perfect. And we need to cover all these mistakes with a coat of love. It's very interesting way in which this man put it. The third thing about love is, it is permanent. If you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 8 to 13, 1 Corinthians 13, verses 8 to 13.
Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be still. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope and love. But the greatest of this is love.
What Paul is saying is that whatever may be the situation, love never fails. In other words, love is bound to win. He talks about the future. He said we don't see everything now that is happening in the world now. We don't understand everything that is happening in this world now. We know what we see everything in part now, but now later on we will see in full. All the things that we do now in this world will go away. They will disappear. There's only one thing that will stay forever, and that is love. That is what he's saying in a nutshell in these particular scriptures. What he's saying is, build bridges of love. Love is bound to win. There is a poster that says, love is like a bridge that connects our hearts when we are apart. The rainbow that colors our world when we are together. And the bond that keeps us learning and growing together in the Lord. Love does that to all of us. As I told you, I had a very interesting week. Last night I had an interesting 2 weeks. The previous issue of the Living Life magazine had gone out. Actually, it had gone out earlier, but the print copy of the issue came a little later. And one of the articles that was there, you must remember it, is a monkey on the front page, and it talks about creation, evolution of both. It's not written by me, it's written by one of our ministers in New Zealand, and I thought it was a very well balanced and a wonderful article, and I thought everyone is going to appreciate it because it gave the evolution side, it gave the biblical creation side of the story, and it showed that how there is a common ground here. We need not be at enmity with each other. We are not trying to prove any of each other wrong. Rather, we should try to see what we can learn from each other. Have respect for each other and what it teaches, and what we can learn from each other rather than confront each other with what we think is right. Again, Paul is saying, what is he saying? We really don't know everything. Frankly, we really don't. But sometimes we get so angry and het up about something that we are not even sure is right. And we can make enmity, and we can make enemies of one another. Anyhow, I received this letter. The Living Life magazine has been running for about 10 years now, more than 10 years really. And I think this was the second, what you call, hate mail that I received. All of the mail that I received so far good, and that's nice. It's also good to get hate mail because what happens is it keeps you on your toes and helps you to do better and prepare and develop the magazine better. Anyway, this person was very angry. I'll tell you, really very angry, and he wrote terrible things in the letter he sent me, or rather the email he sent me, and basically attacked. This is only one article. He attacked not only that particular magazine as a Living Life magazine, but all the magazines that ever came out as Living Life. And he showed how that magazine is not a Living Life, not a magazine without direction, everything he wrote about. Whatever he could throw at me, he did. Okay. Now, most people would be upset. Living Life magazine is very dear to me, okay? It's something like part of me. I love the magazine because I'm doing it. I'm the author of it. And it's like how we love our children. Because our children are in some ways ours. Okay, so we love it and we defend it to the teeth, to the end of our lives, so to speak. And here was this man writing this terrible letter just based on one article that was in the magazine. Now what would you do normally? You get upset, you get angry, and you will write back an equally angry letter. A letter of hate and anger to a person. And then he would probably write you another letter in the same way, and you'll be writing back and forth till Jesus Christ returns. So now that what I thought is, okay, this man is angry. There must be a good reason why he's angry, and maybe not just the article has made him angry or something else. So what I did is I wrote back to him a very sweet letter. I wrote him a very sweet letter, and I told him, see, I can understand how you feel. I told him that, see, I believe what you believed at one time. But you know what? Knowledge grows. Knowledge changes. I am not trying to convince you. I said, I have not written a letter, that article, or a person who wrote an article does not even know you. I put an article in the magazine not because I wanted to refute something. He has written a book actually on this creation. Not to refute your book. I haven't even read your book. So I'm not attacking your book. What I'm trying to present to Christians is a side of the story that maybe you never looked at, because we just sweep something when we don't like under the carpet and don't want to look at it. Look at it. Discuss it. Study it, and then if you find it is wrong, fine, say it's wrong. Nobody's convincing you about anything. Anyway, I wrote him a nice letter. He wrote back a letter of embarrassment, and he said, I threw a temper tantrum. And he said, I'm very sorry about it. So what happens is sometimes we as pastors have to show love even where we see hatred. Now it's hard to do, but we need to do that, and we can turn a person around by showing love. Where we see hatred, we turn the person around. I give you that example to show you that if we exercise love, love is something that is permanent. I feel that I have made a friend of this person. And not only that, he has introduced me to somebody that I don't know, I never met before. And he said, he's got similar questions, please communicate with him. I don't know, this man may come into the church one day, who knows, but at least I may change his life in some way or the other. So now I've told you a little bit of love. You've seen what Paul has to say about love. What our question now that I have for you is, with all this information, how can we put this information into action? What can we do to put this information into action? Number one is, stand up for the truth and proclaim the gospel of God's love. Stand up for the truth and proclaim the gospel of God's love. Psalms chapter 40 verses 9 to 10. This sermon is getting a little longer than I thought it would, but I think it is important that you understand this very important aspect, because you realize God is love. Psalms 40 verses 9 and 10.
I proclaim righteousness in the day of Sunday. I do not seek my needs, as you do in the world. I do not hide your righteousness in my heart. I speak of your faithfulness and salvation. I do not conceal your love in the way of your grace.
Yeah, we find this is what Valentine did. In spite of the decree from the king, he refused to stop sponsoring people for marriages and getting them married. He refused because he knew what he was doing was right. He knew that what he was doing was right. So we have to be willing to express the love of God to everyone we come in contact with, whether they are believers or non-believers. And we have to show love towards them. That sometimes we may speak about what we believe and they may contradict us. Don't let that anger you. Sure, it is of importance to you. Sure, you love you what you believe. Don't let it anger you. Sometimes a soft word turns persons from anger, turns them off from anger. There are a lot of scriptures in the Bible that I cannot go through right now, but you can note down and study. One of them is 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 18. Romans 5 verse 5. It tells us that let us not be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it is the gospel of love. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 8 also talks about it. And John chapter 3 verse 17. John chapter 3 verse 17, if you read it, you realize that Jesus did not come on this earth to judge us. He came on this earth to bear our sins. He was not judgmental. And we have to be very careful when we talk to other people that we are not judgmental towards them. We are not pointing a finger at them or shaking our fist at them and telling them, you will go to hell for the way you think. We should not do that, because we understand what we understand because of God's love. We have done nothing to deserve our calling. We have done nothing to deserve our calling. The second point that we can do, the second thing we can do to show love to all mankind is die to self for the sake of others. Die to self for the sake of others. John chapter 15 verse 13 says, greater love has no one than this, that he lay down to lay down one's life for his friend. Jesus did exactly that. He showed his genuine love for others by laying down his life for his friend. You know, it is easy for us to say that I will actually lay down my life for my friend. But you know what? Very few of us will be called upon to actually lay down our lives for our friend or our spouse or whatever it is. But you know what? On a day-to-day basis, we are laying down our lives for one another. How? By showing a lack of selfishness. When we put others before us in the things we do, what are we doing? We are sacrificing ourselves for others. So this sacrifice is part of this laying down our lives for our friends or for our spouses or whatever it is. And we see Jesus Christ did exactly that in Galatians chapter 2 verse 20 says, Galatians 2 verse 20 says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So we can see what we are supposed, how we reciprocate to God's love for us by showing love to one another. So we'll be willing to lay down our lives for our friends. The third thing that we can do is give your life to Jesus. Give your life to Jesus. John chapter 3 verse 16 says, again you know these verses and do not turn there. It says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So God gave his life for us and he has saved us. We should become loving people. There are a lot of scriptures in the Bible that talk about this kind of love. Brethren, we as Christians should learn to love one another, to learn to love our spouses, that there should be no hatred, no anger. And there are going to be differences, of course. Always there are differences of opinion, there are differences of how different things have to be done. But we need to learn to adjust to one another, to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for others. It's not easy, just as mentioned, but it needs to be done. That is part of our training. God is training us today to take that part. We are called to be leaders, and not just leaders like the emperors were in old days, passing decrees, cruel decrees, and forcing people to do what they want them to do. We are servant leaders. We lead by serving. So, brethren, if you celebrate Valentine's Day, and there's no harm in doing so, celebrate it, understanding what this festival is all about. We can easily be sidetracked by so many other things like Valentine's Day, or rather the commercialism in Valentine's Day. But what is more important is the true meaning of Valentine's Day and what we should do and how we should act in order to show our love for one another. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Our loving Creator God, our Redeemer, Father, you have sent your Son Jesus Christ to die for our sins. And in this ultimate sacrifice, Father, you showed your love for us, your undying, stubborn love for us. We know, Father, that whatever we may do in this life, you will always love us. Even if we walk away from you, you will still love us. Such is your love for all of mankind. Father, help us not to spurn that love. Help us not to take that love for granted. Help us to realize the deep meaning of this love that you have shown towards us, and help us to reciprocate by showing love to one another. We know, Father, that that's the only way we can show our love for you is by keeping your laws, keeping your commandments, doing what is right in your sight, and loving one another as you have loved us. We know, Father, that it is a hard task to do. And we know that we need your help and your guidance in showing that godly love to one another that you have shown us. We thank you, Father, for that love. We thank you for all that you do in our lives. We ask you to help us to do our part, Father, to make this world a more loving world, this world a less violent world, this world a less selfish world than it is today. Help us, Father, to make this world a better world. We know, Father, that our efforts will not necessarily bear much fruit because we are dealing with people that are rebellious of your way of life. People who do not want to hear your way of life. But we know also, Father, that you have got the power to open their minds so that they will hear and they will understand and they will act on it. We know, Father, that a day will come in the future when all of mankind will learn to love like you love. And we ask that day come quickly. We thank you for all the numerous blessings you've given us, for the opportunity we have to worship you, Father, today, and for the numerous gifts you give us and the knowledge of your word. Help us to act on it. We thank you for all the numerous blessings, for the very intimate contact you have with us and in our lives, for giving us so many blessings that we cannot even imagine. We thank you for all of that. We ask all this in Jesus' holy and most blessed name. Amen.